Welcome to the Attorney Talk Podcast, sponsored by Szaferman Lakind with your host, Sam Gaylord, disability litigator in the state of New Jersey. In each episode of the Attorney Talk Podcast, Sam has casual conversations about the law with varied professionals throughout the legal industry. You can find this show on all the major platforms, including YouTube, LinkedIn, Facebook, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and on our website, Szaferman.com. Now here's the host of Attorney Talk, Sam Gaylord.
Welcome to another episode of Attorney Talk, casual conversations about the law. I am your host, Sam Gaylord, partner at Szaferman Lakind, and today I have the absolute pleasure and privilege to introduce my friend and now law partner, Jenna Shapiro. Good afternoon. How are you doing today?
Excited to be here.
I'm glad you're here. I'm glad you had the time to join us. Very excited, looking forward to our conversation today. Before we jump in and start talking about everything all about Jenna, I always ask my guests a question just to sort of mix it up right from the get-go. And yes, absolutely. And I want you to tell us something initially, something about yourself that most people might not know. Good one, right?
Nothing like being put on the spot, Sam.
That's what I'm saying, right off the get-go.
So I will tell you my embarrassing thing that people will start to know, but you wouldn't know ahead of time. But I am a giant Disney buff, and embarrassingly go to Disney several times a year. So I am one of those Disney adults who go both with my children and without.
Outstanding. That is out. I did not know that, and that is outstanding. So you basically always like being in the happiest place in the world.
It's good for everybody's mental health, especially in my line of work. So nothing like walking down Main Street with a coffee.
There you go. And speaking of your line of work, Jenna is a partner at Szaferman Lakind, but why don't you give everybody a little descriptor of what it is that you actually do?
So I am a matrimonial attorney. So I deal with all aspects of family law. So everything having to do with your family, from divorce, custody, post-divorce issues, all that fun stuff, and stressful stuff. I get to be there for families during that time.
Well, I like the way that you word that, like being there for families. I would think that your particular line of law at times probably gets not the greatest of raps, if you will. That's sort of fair to say.
That is absolutely fair to say. You know, that old adage that criminal attorneys get to see sort of bad people on their best day. I get to see really good people sometimes on their worst day. So, as I always say, I'm a, 10% lawyer and 90% therapist for most of the time, but that's what makes what I do fun, to be able to be there for people when they're going through something pretty hard.
Yeah, it's interesting because, in my line of work in the disability side, you see really good people having and struggling with what's happening. And I always refer to, it's the reason that we're called counselors is not necessarily because that's an old name, but it seems to be part of my day-to-day operation.
And that's why we get along so well, Sam.
That's right. Absolutely. So Jenna, you've only been with Szaferman for almost a year. We're coming up on your 1-year anniversary, right?
That's true. I've been with the firm since July, and great decision, and so happy to be with you and with our other partners. Feels like being home again. So love being here.
Yeah, and we absolutely love having you, and it really is a lot of fun when we can finally get out and mix and mingle a little bit. But tell me, how long have you actually been practicing law?
I am coming up on almost 15 years of doing family law. I've done nothing but this. So I started my career clerking for a family judge in Monmouth County. I then went to a large county firm, then a large state firm, then a nationwide firm, and now here finding home at Szaferman Lakind. But I've only done this for 15 wonderful years, long, wonderful years.
Well, I certainly appreciate that. But let me ask you this. So what prompts Jenna to go to law school?
I am one of those weirdos who knew from the second that I knew what a career was that I wanted to be a lawyer. So when I was that kid negotiating bedtime and negotiating snacks from the time I was little, and I never thought to do anything else. Now I would love to be a Disney vacation planner and do anything else, but I love being a lawyer. The practice has certainly changed, but I really like what we do, and as I said, sort of being there for families.
Yeah.
So there was never anything else on my vision board but being a lawyer, and here we are all these years
Terrific.
later.
Terrific. So, all right. So, a good negotiator as a kid. Is there any one thing that you could sort of point to, either college or before, that you definitely sort of locked it in that, I'm going to get through college so I can get to law school kind of a thing?
So I always knew I wanted to be a lawyer. I didn't know what area of law I wanted to do. I thought that I'd want to be a criminal attorney. I love being in a courtroom. I love litigating. And I don't get to do as much as I wish I did in family law, because I'm sure you can imagine most cases settled, trials are expensive. But when I was in law school in Washington, D.C., we had a pro bono clinic that helped underprivileged families, especially women, um, going through domestic violence cases. And we dealt with a large immigrant population in DC, and being able to help and deal with those types of issues for those families made me fall in love with family law. So I always say I fell into this more than I chose this, but I couldn't imagine doing anything else.
Well, that's really cool. Yeah. So it's interesting because I was also one of those kids that said I was going to college only so that I could go to law school. And I can remember the reason for that was at the time we were living in Massachusetts. And for my eighth grade, before eighth grade started, we had to read a book over the summer. And I read the biography of F. Lee Bailey. And I was done with that. And I turned to my mother and said, "Yeah, I'm going to law school, Mom, and don't worry about it." And so Syracuse, 4 years, right to Seton Hall, and there it was. The fun story, though, about why I chose those particular schools, Syracuse has got family. My uncle, my grandfather all went to Syracuse, but the reason I sort of stayed back then, it was the original Big East, was because I became a college basketball junkie. And so with my years at Syracuse, it was so awesome. And then, of course, when I got the invite to join Seton Hall, still in the Big East, and back then it was PJ Carlissimo. So, and I'm a law student, so I still get the $8 tickets. So it was a relatively no brainer at that point. So,
Love it.
but yeah, I'm the same. I always wanted to be an attorney, and I absolutely love the fact that you can make a phone call. It's like, "Hi, I'm Sam Gaylord. I'm an attorney at Szaferman Lakind," and there's
Yeah,
always sort of an elevated somebody gets a little. I'll use the word concerned or aware all of a sudden on the other side of the phone, right?
absolutely. Absolutely.
So
A little
you
bit of
made
power we have.
well, listen, might as well take advantage of it, right? But it's interesting. One of the comments that you have mentioned here was that you've seen in 15 years a change in the practice. And tell me, I'm not to give my age away, but I'm coming up on 30, and there's definitely been a huge change. But I think also in the last 15 years, an even more dramatic change than my first 15 years. But from your perspective, what do you find to be some of the larger changes in the practice in what you do?
So I think a lot really changed post COVID, where when things were more in person before the pandemic, I think especially in my area of law, which is so unnecessarily adversarial a lot of times because there's so much emotions running through, the practice was just a lot more collegial before. And I don't know if that was because we all got to hang out in the hall waiting and everybody got to be together, and now you're behind a keyboard most of the time or you're on Zoom, which certainly has its positives. But
Hmm.
I do find that this practice and the people in it shifted, both the litigants, unfortunately the lawyers, and the bench as well, that I didn't necessarily experience before COVID. And that's a
Right.
shame. And um, you know when Geraldine Lawrence, who was a family lawyer, was president of the state bar, she put forth a program of putting attorneys first and attorney wellness. And that really opened my eyes to a lot of things of, being told by the court that I have to be somewhere when I'm telling them that I can't. I have to do something for my family. Or when I'm saying to an adversary, I have to go to my kid's field trip. I felt like before the pandemic, that was a no-brainer. And now I just think we lost a little bit of, we could be adversaries in a courtroom and we're going to fight for our clients, but we're friends or colleagues outside. And I think a little bit of that got lost in the pandemic, which is a shame. And I hope that we get back there. But I definitely have seen a bit of a change in remembering we're all people outside of this practice.
Yeah, yeah. One of the phrases I've often used is I call it telephone tough guy, but now it's like sort of Zoom Teams tough person, right? Where, if I'm sending an email, I could be all kinds of snarky, but if you're sitting there having a conversation in person, it's a little tougher to pull that off.
People are brave behind the keyboard, but
Yeah,
again, sort of remembering we're all people, and there are certainly people who take advantage. But if you're one of those people who don't always ask for those favors or don't always need adjournments,
yeah,
it really troubles me when I can't get that from
yeah.
the court.
Yeah. So let me ask you this though. Now you're sort of a veteran, having done this for 15 years in terms of the COVID. What about a young lawyer? What do you think the impact has been on you? Because I have a thought on that. But what's you? I don't know if in your practice you see a lot of young lawyers, but if you do, how do you think COVID may be impacting the younger attorney, if you will?
I think it really affected everybody. And I think it's that the idea of being in person. And I know that when everything went virtual and people didn't have to come to the office and make those relationships or be in the courthouse and make those relationships or learn from those who are older than you, those are some of the best times that I had, is being able to always walk into a partner's office. And I've had great jobs and great mentors. And I think a lot of that got lost. And I think that, I'll never forget post COVID when managing partners wanted people to start coming back into the office and saying, like, I remember I was at a different job saying, well, we're going to lose people if we make them come back to the office. And I couldn't wrap my head around that, of the idea that people didn't want to learn. And I think that's a problem with sort of the younger generation of wanting to learn and wanting to forge those relationships that I've had the same relationships being in even at different jobs in different counties since I was a baby lawyer, and I can rely upon those. And I think the next generation after me doesn't have that
Yeah.
same ability.
Yeah, one of my areas of expertise is workers' compensation, and I remember I started in a larger local law firm, and when I started, I remember it had to be for 6 or 9 months. All I was doing was literally going with a partner, sitting in the courtroom, sitting in chambers, and just watching and then having the conversation about what I had watched with the attorney I was with in explaining what my thoughts were and who I thought was good and then just being able to watch other people who had done it for a long time um, do it was, I think, one of the most incredible learning experiences in terms of building my own sort of professional repertoire.
Yeah, seeing what styles worked for you, seeing what worked for judges, and being able to. I remember, again, as a baby attorney, just going and sitting in different courtrooms and getting comfortable with judges, and seeing how I wanted my style based upon what I saw, I think really got lost
Yeah.
post COVID. And I think that's a shame for the next generation to come after us.
Yeah, no, I agree. And it's interesting because, like for me, there's the advantage in our world is just simply I can do court in Camden, Mount Holly, and Trenton without leaving my desk. So that's good. But it seems very transactional. The word I've inserted is transactional. In other words, you have nobody sticking around, nobody listening to anybody else, and it's, well, I'm done, so thanks, Judge. I'll see you later. Click
Sure.
off, move to the next email.
Right.
So I agree. Sort of lost that big change in the practice of law. So tell me again, 15 years of doing this, and I'm sure you've seen crazy cases and straightforward cases. And you've talked about liking representing the families and that stuff. Tell me though, specifically, if you can, is there a case or a situation or a type of law that you would say, if I could just do this out of my whole matrimonial practice, it would be like a walk down Main Street in Disney?
So I love litigating. And like I said, like trials are like it breathes life back into me. I really enjoy it. And it was a struggle for me because having been going to law school in DC, where things are incredibly formal, the rules of evidence are something you need to know, and the rules of court. And then I got to New Jersey, and one of the things that, it's sort of a joke in my area, like I'm the evidence gal. Like nobody in this practice knows the rules of evidence, and I could quote them to you in my sleep. But I love them. It's so embarrassing to say how giddy I get over evidence, but I love trying a case. I love cross-examining. So if I never had to write another motion for the rest of my life and I could just try everything. I joke with some of our partners, some of our PI partners who said, anytime you want to come join us to try a PI case, I would love to do that. But I really, really love being in a courtroom. And I was like, I know settlement is best for my clients. So that's what I always try to do, because trials are incredibly expensive. And sort of my tagline is always, why do you want the stranger in the black robe to make a decision for your family when you could make a decision for your family? But being able to poke holes in the other side's case and to get my client the best deal is not something that I often see in my practice. So I
Yeah.
really do like domestic violence cases. As that was coming out, it sounds terrible because nobody should like domestic violence cases,
Sure.
but that is one area of law that we see a lot of trials in. So
Gotcha.
I really like prepping a case. I like the strategy behind building a cross examination and building your client's case and what you need to prove. And it's just an fortunate for my client, but an unfortunate part as a lawyer to not get a lot of. So
Right.
that's why I
Right.
think I
Right.
really like DV cases to be there on both sides,
Sure.
because you want to be there for the victims in those cases. But I'm sure you can imagine there's also a lot of domestic violence cases where people try to use it for strategy. I always
Yeah.
say that as a sword instead of a shield, and that statute is supposed to be there to shield victims. So
Sure.
even being there for people who are falsely accused of things,
Sure.
I really enjoyed the strategy part of building a case with
Nice.
people.
Nice. Well, and it's interesting because, again, in my world, the very few trials as well, everything more or less, resolves, even if it's not an admitted case, it still usually resolves. But I do a lot of pension work. And so I get to go to the appellate division quite a bit. And I agree, because to me, that's what I refer to as like real lawyering, where you're on your feet and you have to make arguments and you get questions, and it's this
Yeah.
interactive. They're trying to poke holes. You're trying to point them to, well, Judge, if you take a look at Appendix AA 32, whatever. So I agree. It's sort of, and for me, I have to agree with you, because to me, it's the juice. I mean, I could do the most of what I do pretty much in my sleep, sort of feel at times like I'm a high paid paralegal.
Right.
But when you get one and you get to be on your feet, and I get to put the full suit back on, and they're really, that's the juice, right? I mean,
Yeah,
that's where it's like the race car driver, where you get to go do what you got to do, right?
absolutely.
Fantastic. Okay. So I want to switch gears a little bit, and we're going to put you as queen of the world in terms of the practice of law. And that's
Burn
probably not
out,
a bad,
ready,
not a
Sam?
bad thing, right? So in Jenna's world, other than being back in court, what would be something that you would like to sort of see across the board in terms of the practice of law itself?
I mean, sort of going back to what we were talking about before, I really want, which isn't necessarily a legal thing, but I'd really like this practice to get back to being friendlier, for lack of a better word. I
Yeah.
really miss that. I went to a bar dinner yesterday for the first time in forever and saw people that I hadn't seen in forever. And thinking about how 5 years ago, I was constantly at bar dinners and making those relationships. And I saw people I consider friends that I haven't seen in 5 years.
Yeah.
But I really would like to see everybody getting back to remembering that this isn't just about the case, and that, again, you're here to advocate for your clients and to do the best that you can when you're there, but to also remember that we're people, they're people. I'm very practical in the way that I practice. And I always say, one day I'll get fired, not from Szaferman Lakind, because I work with a lot of good people, but sometimes it doesn't have to be scorched earth litigation. You
Right.
know, the old adage, I'd rather pay you than pay him. I just don't practice that way. And I wish some of my colleagues would remember that.
Mhm.
Why are we spend $15,000 over a $500 issue? That's the stuff that keeps me up at night. And that's the stuff that makes me not want to do, not like
Sure.
this practice,
Sure.
because I'm finding where that scorched earth, unreasonable litigation used to be the rare situation. It's now become the norm. And
Mm.
I would really like everybody to get back to remembering what it's like to be people, and that these families are families. They're not corporations. They're not blank checks, because again, in my line of work, most families can't afford what they go through.
Right.
And recognizing that you're not going to live the same lifestyle in two houses that you are in one, and working together for the greater good,
Mhm.
while still representing your client, I think is incredibly important, and what I'd like to see. I had a mediation on Tuesday that was a long time coming, and we needed to get things done. And it turned into an intervention instead of a mediation,
Mm.
because the fella came, I represent the wife, and he has a significant drinking problem, and it was very noticeable. And we all sort of stepped back from our advocate roles, and everybody figured out how to get this guy some help, because he's a dad and he's a husband and he's a person. And it reminded me of what good could come out of this practice.
Yeah.
And we all stopped being lawyers that day and all were able to be people again. And that's what I really miss from this
Yeah.
practice.
Yeah. No, it's the civility. It's the way it should be. It should be that I don't need to confirm thing 3 times over by a letter and then a email confirming the letter. And it should be that we talked about it. We agreed upon it, that, there's a email that confirms that, and that should be it. It should be done. And,
Call me, because
right.
I don't need a letter to the court. You don't need to send, again, sort of advocating for the sake of advocating, being adversarial for the sake of being adversarial. uh, Pick up the phone. I'll work
Right.
with you. That's what I do. You don't have to immediately file the motion. We could work it out.
Right.
Sometimes you have to. Sometimes you have to send the letter. Sometimes you have to file the motion. But
Yeah.
I want to be able to put my head on the pillow at night knowing I did what I could for my client without burning down the house.
Yeah, yeah. I am curious though. You had mentioned as part of when you were talking about litigating, you had mentioned it's the person in the black robe. Are most of the matrimonial trials done in front of just a judge, no jury?
Correct. So there is no jury in matrimonial world, much to my dismay, with the exception of Kivas complaints, which are personal injury actions that
Mm.
are brought into a matrimonial action. Um, that you could make a request to have a jury here. And often the cases are bifurcated. So we'll hear your personal injury claims as under your matrimonial action, but you could have a claim to a jury, but no juries in family law. That'd be
Gotcha.
great.
Right? Yeah. And again, in what I do, it's always if it's Social Security, it's a federal administrative law judge.
Right.
Pensions, it's administrative law judges, and than workers' comp judges. So there's no juries, and but again, to me, that would just be sort of adding to the juice of getting fired up for a trial, right? You got to put on a show versus just doing it for the judge.
So once in my career, I'd like to try a jury case. That's why I was saying our PI partners have said something in jest, and I'll take them up on it one day. But I would
I would
love
I would I
love
would
to
think
try.
that either Hubie or Pags would probably have you allow you to try one. Why not?
Yep.
Fantastic, fantastic. So, and in addition to being a lawyer, a partner, and doing what you do, mom, and how many kids?
I am a mom, so I have as I say, I have 3 here on earth and 1 in heaven. So I have an 11-year-old, an almost 5-year-old, and an almost 3-year-old. So I
All
have my
right.
well, so stressful job, stressful home life. Yeah.
And so, balance. How does
Yeah.
that go?
Not well, but we're working on it. Somebody said to me once, "I'm not thriving, I'm surviving," and nothing has ever spoke to me so much as
Right.
I am not surviving. I'm not thriving. I'm surviving at the moment, but I
Yeah.
wouldn't change the world. So
Right. Yeah.
everything, especially with what I've gone through
Sure.
personally and losing a child, that which happened just before COVID really changed me. Of early in my career, I wanted to be the youngest partner. I saw professional goals for myself, and without realizing, I think it came at a little bit of expense of family time. And my husband was very supportive, and he's great dad. Um, but I think it came out of a little expense. Like I remember doing bath time in my suit because I got home right in time to do it, and needed to do those types of things. And
Right.
now I remember a little bit more, and that's why I'm so grateful to be here, because everybody that we work with, I really feel like has the same values of
Yeah.
take the vacation, go on the field trip, be with the kids, because work
Yeah.
comes tomorrow. And that's something that for me, not always successfully, but I really try to remember.
Yeah.
Sometimes the work has to get in the way, but recognizing that it'll be there again tomorrow.
Yeah.
And go to the horrible Liberty Science Center field trip I had to go to last week, but I made a memory for my son
Right.
and maybe for myself.
Yeah.
And the kids were there again the next day.
Yeah, it's really, really cool. So I'm obviously further along in my parental journey, as my youngest is now a freshman in college, and my wife and I are sort of in that empty nester zone, trying to, make sure we still like each other and still want to do things together. And so far, so good.
I know the
Um,
matrimonial attorney if that doesn't work out,
oh yeah.
Sam.
No way, no way. Because first of all, there's nobody else that would put up with me, and I know that. And God bless her, because she's an angel. So, yeah, that's not happening at all. But I had come to Szaferman from my own firm, and I had been there for 18, almost 19 years. And certainly the rubber chicken dinners and the events and the doctor meetings and the this and the that, and you had to building your own and being in that, constant names got to be out there, recognition kind of thing. There's no doubt that the littler things I missed out on. Never missed a big thing, because that was when I grew up. That was what was happening. My father traveled a lot, so was never around. And so I swore that I would make the big things, the concerts and the teacher conferences and the field trips and stuff like that. But was rare around for the little things. And now the kids are older, and now it's so much fun. You go hang. And this past weekend, I went into the city with my younger daughter, and we went to see a country western show. I mean, it was, it's really cool stuff now. So certainly something to look forward to. I will tell you
Oh,
that.
I look
So
forward.
yes, absolutely. So before we wrap up here, any final words you want our listeners to sort of be aware of you and what you do and all that good stuff?
So thank you again for giving me this opportunity. You said it was going to be fun, and that I shouldn't worry, and you were 100% right.
Good.
But I'm in a really hard area of work, and a stressful area, and I just sort of remind everybody, as if you're the client and going through it, or you're the lawyer on it, to again sort of remember what's important. And hopefully as lawyers, we get to be there for our clients, and hopefully clients remember that you might not like each other right now, but at one point you did. And I really do love what I do and being there for families. And I'm really thankful to be at our firm and to meet people like you and our other partners. And I'm grateful to be here.
That's fantastic. And you're certainly grateful. It's a fantastic addition. I know that we talk about it all the time. It's an absolute thrill to have you as a partner of mine. And I can't wait for us to go out and hang out outside of all this nonsense. So thank you again. And so if people are hearing us and they want to get in touch with you for a case or questions or whatnot, what's the best way that people can get in touch with you?
You think I remember my phone number off the top of my head, Sam? So you can reach me at my email is jshapiro@szaferman.com. You can certainly find us on our website, find me, find Sam, find our other partners. It really is a great group of people, great lawyers, some of the most talented people. I've been at a number of firms, and we really have a really talented, amazing group of people for a full service firm. I think my phone number is 609-275-0039, but definitely find me, Sam, and our partners on our website.
So anyways, I want to just again say thank you. I appreciate you joining me on Attorney Talk, casual conversations about the law. And I know that my audience certainly has enjoyed our conversation, hopefully as much as I have today. So thank you again for joining us. And I look forward to speaking with our next guest on our next show. So in the meantime, everybody take care, be well, and we'll talk to you next episode. Bye
Thanks,
now.
Sam.
You've been tuning into the Attorney Talk podcast, sponsored by Szaferman Lakind, with your host, Sam Gaylord, disability litigator in the state of New Jersey. You can find this show on all the major platforms, including YouTube, LinkedIn, Facebook, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and on our website, szaferman.com. Thank you for your positive reviews, comments, questions, and for sharing this show with others.